We're starting our series on objections today, and we're going to start with the one we get most often. I need to think about it. I need to think about it is an umbrella that can mean a lot of different things. It can mean they're not interested and they just don't want to tell you. It can mean they're afraid of making a decision. It can mean the cost is too much and they don't want to tell you that. It can be just a flat out delay, or sometimes they may really need to think about it. The problem is most of the time people handle it in such a way that you don't know what the real reason is. And so it becomes a situation where you kick the can down the road because you don't want to be pushy, you don't want to be aggressive, but it's one of the most important objections you can hit head on. Because the reality is what you guys sell, you have to understand the product. And any delay results in them understanding the product less. As I say all the time, sales is about the perceived value and the price. If the perceived value is higher than the price, they buy. If the perceived value is lower than the price, they don't. And when you do your presentation and walk through all the reasons their perceived value is at its highest peak, however, every minute that passes after you leave that meeting, their perceived value starts to drop. And the moment it drops below the price, you have no chance of making a sale. When you marry that with the fact that people will put off making a decision as long as you allow them to put off making a decision, it's a recipe for disaster because they want to delay making a decision. And every moment they delay making a decision, they forget more about what you said, but the price never changes. They're always aware of what the price is and the impact of the price. So that's why it always breaks down. And as a result, because they don't want to tell you they don't remember it as much as you said, and they don't want to tell you the price is too high, and they don't want to tell you they've decided they're not going to do it, they ghost you. That's why you have to do certain things during that first appointment in order to not leave with the I need to think about it. Or if they do legitimately need to think about it, you have a very set time that you're going to reach back out to them and an understanding that you're reaching back out to them for one decision and one decision only. And it's as simple as that. Because if that follow up involves more than just simply telling you yes or no, they're going to ghost you every time. And so the way you approach it, and we're going to walk through this, and those of you who've been around for a long time, know that this is a core feature of what I talk about, is the first thing you have to do is recognize that you're dealing with insecurities. You're dealing with Sleary. Sleary is that substance that gets in your head that just clogs up your thoughts and prevents you from taking action. That's taking place in the part of the customer. So you really need to be aware of what's happening in the customer's mind. So let's walk through this, see exactly how we can deal with the I need to think about it in such a way that you manipulate and manage their insecurities. First thing we need to do, at the end of the presentation and before you start the close, you need to ask one question every time. If money wasn't an issue, would you want to be a part of this? If money wasn't an issue, would you want to be part of this? Now, you ask this before you start the close for several reasons. The first is you need to determine if they're sold. When you ask that question, you're basically saying, if I give you this for free, will you take it? And if they don't immediately say yes, then there's other issues. They're not sold. And you have to continue selling them on the idea, sharing the values, find out what they're not sold about. And that is essential because they have to be sold on the product and the value before you enter the close. So you ask that question to determine if they're sold. The next thing you do is you need to make sure there aren't any other minor lingering objections that you don't know about. And this will clear those out. And then the third is it sets you up. You walk into the close knowing that the only thing that will stop them from buying is price. That gives you a lot of power when we get close to the end, and we'll show you how to exert that power. So it goes like this. However you wrap up your presentation, when you get them to find out if this is the product they want, then if money wasn't an issue, would you want to be a part of this product? And then when they say yes, which hopefully they'll say yes if you've done a good presentation, then you say, okay, well, my job now is to find something you're comfortable with that will help you grow your business. My job now is to find something you're comfortable with that'll help you grow your business. So now you've converted your energy from high energy during the presentation to empathy during the close. And the close is all about empathy, because once they've decided this product is something that will help them, now they just have to develop the confidence to say yes. Because that's what the close often comes down to, is you making them feel good and comfortable about the decision to buy. You go through the ad size, you go through everything else, you get to the end, you've broken it all down, you've given them three choices, you've asked them to pick from one of those three choices. You've now said, you've given them whatever discounts you're going to give them, and then you basically ask for the sale. When you ask for the sale, if they say anything other than, here's my credit card, you know that they've got a problem with the price, because you eliminated everything else beforehand. And this is where you have power, because you have knowledge. That knowledge is that right now they're not buying because they're not comfortable with the price. You have to understand that. If you leave them with the I'm thinking about it in the works, you have to understand you're going to be ghosted. You have to understand that they're not going to buy. Maybe 1 in 70 purchase when they say, I need to think about it, because they forget what you told them and their perceived value drops below the price. When I talk about kicking them in the balls, it means recognizing at that moment the sale is dead. You can pretend otherwise, you can hope otherwise, but you have to be real about the idea that that sale legitimately died the moment you let them think about it. Not because it was a bad decision, but it was that people forget what you told them. And everything they forget about what you told them means their perceived value of what they're buying is less. It's not about making them buy something they shouldn't buy. It's about putting them in a position where they have to make a decision while they're fully informed, instead of making a decision later when they're no longer fully informed because they've forgotten part of what you said. So when they say anything other than, yes, I'll buy, that is when you have to bring back up their answer to the question before. Hey, just a few minutes ago, you said that if money wasn't an issue, that you'd be in this magazine or you'd buy this product. Now, I'm assuming that means that money's an issue and you're just not comfortable with that price. Make sure you use the word comfortable. Comfortable makes people feel comfortable. Can I assume that you're just not comfortable with that price? What you don't say is, can I assume that price is too high? Can I assume you can't afford that? Because those sound like attacking questions which fuel their insecurities and make them think that you don't trust them as a business owner. Where if you say, can I assume you're not comfortable? That's an elevating question, because it makes them feel like you respect their decisions and their ability to make good decisions relating to their business. Two entirely different questions that sound just alike, but it's all about how it is perceived by the insecurities of the person you're meeting with. So they're always going to say, yeah, I'm just not quite comfortable with that. And now guess what you've done? You started the money conversation. Now you can negotiate and navigate to something they are comfortable with. What often happens is, even though we've had 1,000 people who've told us they need to think about it, who ended up not buying, in that moment, we convince ourselves that this one's going to be different. I don't want to push back because this one's going to be different. I can tell he really likes it. And so we just hold on to that hope. But the reality of it is, if you could walk around the table and kick them in the balls, you would not hurt your chance of closing the sale. Your chance is zero or near zero. Nothing you can do makes it worse. Now you have the money conversation. Also, remember, nobody likes talking about money. So when they say, I need to think about it, what you're thinking is, okay, if that half price is too expensive for him, when we talk on Monday or when I call him back and he tells me that price is too high, I'll be able to offer the quarter page at a lower price. That's what we're telling ourselves. It's bullshit, because you're giving them the ability to decide when to have a conversation. They don't want to talk about money. When you call them back and they see it's you, they know that if they answer the phone, they have to talk about money in some capacity. Of course, they're not going to answer. Of course, they're going to ghost you, because you gave them the power to decide when to have a conversation that they have no desire to have. That's why you have to initiate that conversation on the first appointment, navigate to something they're comfortable with, and then walk away with it. Here's what you have to recognize going in: an 8th page signed is far better than a 2-page center spread maybe. And I know we get all excited about that 2-page center spread maybe, but the reality of it is, it's a 2-page center spread no if you don't handle that objection. You have to have that money conversation. So just to summarize this all again, at the end of the presentation, if money wasn't an issue, would you want to be in this magazine? Would you want to be a part of this product? My job now is to find something you're comfortable with that will help you grow your business or whatever the purpose of your product is. Then when you told me that money wasn't an issue, you'd be in the magazine. Can I assume you're not comfortable with that price, and then navigate to something they're comfortable with? Because if you walk away with them needing to think about it, you're not going to make the sale. Now, probably 1 out of every 10 people that say I need to think about it really need to think about it. There's something going on in their business that they need to decide on before your product makes sense. And so in that particular case, when you've narrowed it down and they just hold to that, no, I've got this going on, I need to make some decisions here before I can decide on that. I've got some time available tomorrow at 10 o'clock in the morning or again at 3. Which one works for you for me to come back and get your answer? Yes or no? You're not setting a second appointment to just chat. You're not setting a second appointment to do a little bit more of the presentation. The purpose of your second appointment is for them to tell you yes or no, because then they will actually think about it between now and then. If they don't, they will have given it zero thought by the time you call them back the next day, because they got caught up in the world and everything else. Having that deadline with a specific goal forces them to have that conversation with themselves in that 1 in 10 opportunity where they just really do need to think about it. But 90% of the time, it's just purely a kick the can down the road. If I went to any of you and said, hey, I'll give you $5,000 to let me shave your head, I need to know Christmas Eve, you're going to decide Christmas Eve. If I tell you I need to know by Friday, you're going to decide Friday. If I tell you I need to know right now, you're going to decide right now. And for a lot of products, that's okay, because the answer would be the same all 3 times. But with what you guys sell, it's not, because the answer is going to change, because right now I understand the product. On Monday, I'll sort of understand the product, but I will have forgotten a little bit of it. And by next Friday, all I remember is, well, John had a magazine that I kind of liked. And that perceived value of that is never going to be high enough to overcome my fear of the price. And we just have to recognize that and accept that as we move forward.